The stagecoach lurched to a halt outside Holbrook, Arizona territory, and Nora Fletcher pressed her gloved hand against her churning stomach, knowing that the man waiting for her answer had every right to turn her away the moment he learned the truth. She descended the wooden steps carefully, her gray traveling dress already coated with dust from 3 days of bone-jarring travel across the desert. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the main street, and she squinted against the glare, searching for the face she had seen only once in a photograph. A stern-looking rancher named Lucas Owens, who had advertised for a wife in the Boston newspaper 6 months ago. Their correspondence had been brief and practical. He needed help running his ranch and wanted children. She needed to escape Boston and the scandal that had destroyed her reputation through no fault of her own. But there was one detail she had failed to mention in her letters, one crucial fact that would likely send her right back on the next stage heading east. She was pregnant, not far along, barely 3 months, and the child was not conceived in sin as her family and former employer believed. The man who had forced himself upon her in the mansion where she worked as a governess had been the master's son, and when she had reported the assault, the family had closed ranks. They called her a liar and a seductress, dismissed her without references, and made certain every respectable household in Boston knew their version of events. Her own parents, devout and reputation conscious, had turned her out rather than face the shame. Lucas Owens was her last hope, and she fully expected that hope to die the moment she confessed. A tall figure separated from the shade of the general store's awning, and Nora's breath caught. The photograph had not done him justice. Lucas stood well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his work-worn shirt and sun-bronzed skin that spoke of years under the Arizona sun. His hair was dark brown, almost black and slightly too long, curling at his collar. But it was his eyes that held her, a striking gray blue that seemed to look right through her protective walls as he approached. "Miss Fletcher." His voice was deep and warm, with a slight drawl that softened the consonants. "Mr. Owens." She clasped her hands together to hide their trembling. "I appreciate you meeting me. Course I would." He smiled then, transforming his serious face into something almost boyish, and reached for her trunk without hesitation. "Been looking forward to this day. Let me get your things loaded. You must be tired from the journey." His enthusiasm made her feel worse. She had expected coldness, perhaps even suspicion, but not this genuine warmth. "Sir, before we go any further, I need to speak with you about something important, something I should have mentioned in my letters." Lucas set the trunk in his wagon and turned to face her fully, his expression growing concerned. "Are you ill? If you need a doctor, we can go right now." "No, nothing like that." She forced herself to meet his eyes, determined to face her fate with dignity. "Perhaps we could speak somewhere more private." He glanced around the dusty street where several townspeople were making no effort to hide their curiosity about the mail-order bride who had just arrived. "My ranch is about an hour's ride. Would you be comfortable discussing it on the way? Or we could step into the hotel restaurant if you prefer. The ranch would be better." She needed time to gather her courage, and the thought of having this conversation in a public dining room made her stomach turn. Lucas helped her onto the wagon seat with a gentle hand under her elbow, then climbed up beside her. He handled the reins with practiced ease, guiding the horses out of town and onto a rutted road that cut through endless stretches of red earth and scrubby vegetation. The landscape was so different from Boston's green hills and crowded streets that Nora felt like she had traveled to another world entirely. They rode in silence for several minutes before Lucas spoke. "Arizona takes some getting used to if you are from back east. Hotter than hell in summer, colder than you would expect in winter, and the land looks harsh until you learn to see its beauty. But there is space here. Freedom. A person can start fresh without the past weighing them down. His words were so perfectly suited to her situation that Nora wondered if he somehow already knew. Is that what you did? Started fresh, in a way. He kept his eyes on the road. Came out here after the war in '66. I was 20 then. Did not have much except what I could carry and a powerful need to be somewhere new. Worked as a ranch hand for 10 years, saved every penny, and finally bought my own place 3 years ago. It is not much yet, just a small house and about 200 acres, but the land is good for cattle and I have plans to expand. You fought in the war. Nora did the calculation in her head. That would make him 33 now, 15 years her senior. She was 18, though her recent experiences had aged her beyond those years. I did. His jaw tightened slightly. Rather not talk about that time if it is all the same to you. Some things are better left buried. I understand that sentiment completely. He glanced at her then, really looked at her, and she saw recognition in his eyes, not of her face but of the pain she carried. I suspect you might, Miss Fletcher. Whatever you need to tell me, I hope you know I am not a man who judges harshly. We have all done things we regret or had things done to us that were not our fault. Tears pricked her eyes unexpectedly. She had been prepared for anger, disgust, rejection, but not for this quiet understanding from a man who did not yet know what he was understanding. You might feel differently once you hear what I have to say. Try me. Nora took a deep breath and clasped her hands tightly in her lap. Last autumn, I was working as a governess for a wealthy family in Boston. Their son came home from university for a visit, and he forced his attentions on me. I said no. I fought. It made no difference. When I reported what happened, the family claimed I was lying to extort money from them. They dismissed me, ruined my reputation, and my own family believed their version of events rather than mine. They told me I was no longer welcome in their home. Lucas's hands tightened on the reins, his knuckles going white, but he did not interrupt. I am with child, Mr. Owens. Not because I wanted to be, not because I did anything wrong, but because a man took what was not his to take. I know this is not what you agreed to when you advertised for a wife. I should have told you in my letters, but I was desperate, and I thought that if I could just get here, just meet you in person, maybe I could explain and you would understand. But I realize now that was selfish of me. You have every right to send me back, and I will go without protest if that is your decision. The silence that followed felt endless. Lucas guided the wagon off the main road onto a narrower track, and Nora could see buildings in the distance, a modest ranch house, a barn, and several outbuildings. Her last hope sat on the horizon, and she waited for it to crumble. When Lucas finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. That boy who hurt you, he's still walking around free. Yes, his family has money and influence. Men like him always go free. That is wrong, dead wrong. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and turned to face her fully. Miss Fletcher, Nora, if I may call you that, I want you to listen to me carefully. What happened to you was not your fault, not one bit of it. And the fact that your own family turned you out rather than standing beside you makes me so angry I could spit nails. Then you are sending me back. What? No. He looked genuinely shocked. Why in the world would I do that? Nora stared at him, unable to comprehend what she was hearing. Because I am carrying another man's child. Because this is not what you wanted. Lucas climbed down from the wagon and came around to her side, offering his hand to help her down. When her feet touched the ground, he did not release her hand immediately. What I wanted was a partner. Someone to share this life with. Someone who would care about this ranch and maybe, in time, care about me. I wanted children, yes, But that child you are carrying needs a father, and I would be honored to fill that role if you will have me. You cannot mean that." She searched his face for signs of pity or duty, but all she saw was sincerity. "I absolutely mean it. Nora, I have been alone for a long time. I built this place with my own 2 hands, thinking that if I made something worthwhile, maybe I would deserve someone to share it with. When I put that advertisement in the paper, I got 3 responses. Yours was the only one that felt real. You did not try to make yourself sound perfect. You talked about wanting a purpose and honest work, about needing a place where you could be yourself. That is what I wanted too. But the baby will be our baby if we move forward with this marriage. Yours and mine in every way that matters." He squeezed her hand gently. "I know this is sudden. We just met, and you have no reason to trust a stranger's word. But I am asking you to give me a chance to prove I mean what I say. Stay. Marry me. Let me be the kind of man who gives you and that child safety and a real home." Nora felt tears streaming down her face, and she did not bother wiping them away. "I do not understand. Why would you do this?" Lucas reached up and very carefully brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb, the gesture so tender it made her chest ache. "Because from the moment I read your first letter, something in me just knew. I cannot explain it better than that. I felt like I had been waiting my whole life for you to arrive, and now that you are here, I am not about to let you go because of something that was not your fault. We all carry scars, Nora. Some just show more than others." She wanted to believe him so badly it frightened her. After months of rejection and cruelty, this cowboy's acceptance felt like water in the desert, almost too good to be real. "What if I cannot be what you need? What if I am too damaged? Then we will figure it out together." He smiled again, that transformative expression that made her heart skip. "Come inside. Let me show you the house. You can have your own room for as long as you want it, and we can take this as slow as you need. I am a patient man." The house was smaller than she expected, but beautifully built, with solid walls and real glass windows. Lucas had clearly put thought into every detail. The main room served as kitchen and living space, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and a handmade table with 4 chairs in the center. 2 doors led to separate bedrooms, and everything was clean and well maintained. "I know it is not fancy," Lucas said, watching her face anxiously, "but it is solid and there is room to add on when we need it. It is perfect." Nora ran her hand along the smooth wood of the table. "Did you make this?" "I did. Made most of the furniture during the winter months when ranch work slows down. Gives me something to do with my hands." He moved to the stove and checked the fire. "You must be starving. I have stew on from this morning. Nothing fancy, but it will fill you up." As he served her food, Nora watched him move around the kitchen with easy competence. This was not a man who expected to be waited on. He had been taking care of himself for years, and it showed in the capable way he handled every task. They ate together at the table, and Lucas asked her questions about her journey, about Boston, about everything except the painful parts. He made her laugh with stories about his early days on the ranch, about the time he tried to break a wild horse and ended up in the horse trough, about the neighboring rancher's daughter who kept bringing him pies until he finally had to tell her gently that he was not interested. "You broke her heart," Nora teased, feeling some of her tension ease. "She recovered quick enough, married the blacksmith's son last spring, and they seem real happy." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You have a beautiful smile. I was hoping I would get to see it." Nora felt heat rise in her cheeks. She was not used to compliments, especially not sincere ones from attractive men. "Thank you for being so kind to me. I truly did not expect it. Then those people back in Boston set your expectations far too low." His expression turned serious. I want to be clear about something, Nora. If we do this, if we get married, I am not expecting you to share my bed until you are ready. Maybe that will be next week, maybe next year, maybe never. I meant what I said about the baby being ours, and I will not push you for anything you are not comfortable giving. Most men would not be so understanding. Most men are fools. He stood and began clearing the dishes. The way I see it, marriage is supposed to be a partnership. That means we both have to be willing participants, not one person demanding and the other submitting. I want a wife who wants to be with me, not one who feels obligated. Nora stood and moved to help him, their hands brushing as they worked side by side. The casual intimacy of the moment felt both foreign and strangely right. When would you want to have the ceremony? Whenever you are ready. Could be tomorrow if you want, or we could wait a few weeks while you settle in and decide if you can truly stand living with me. His tone was light, but she could hear the uncertainty underneath. I think I would like a few days to adjust if that is acceptable. This has all been so much to take in. Of course, take all the time you need. He paused in his washing and turned to face her. Nora, I need you to understand something. You are safe here. Completely safe. I will never force you or hurt you or make you feel like you did something wrong. I give you my word on that. The tears came again, and this time she let them fall freely. Lucas set down the dish he was holding and very carefully pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried out months of pain and fear and loneliness. He did not try to shush her or tell her everything would be fine. He just held her, one hand stroking her hair, and let her feel what she needed to feel. When the storm finally passed, Nora pulled back and wiped her eyes. I am sorry. I did not mean to fall apart like that. Do not apologize. You have been holding that in for too long. He guided her to a chair and poured her a cup of water from the pitcher on the table. Why do not you rest while I finish up here? Your room is ready whenever you want it. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in days, Nora stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. She had arrived in Arizona expecting to be sent away in shame, and instead, she had found a man who welcomed her like he had been waiting his whole life for her to arrive. It seemed impossible, like something from the romantic novels she used to read in secret, and yet it was real. Lucas Owens was real, with his kind eyes and gentle hands, and the way he looked at her like she was something precious rather than something ruined. For the first time in months, Nora allowed herself to hope. The next morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting golden squares on the floor, and she could hear Lucas moving around in the kitchen. She dressed quickly in one of her simpler dresses and emerged to find him plating food. "Morning," he said with that easy smile. "Hope I did not wake you. I am used to rising early for ranch work. You did not. This smells wonderful." She accepted the plate he offered and sat at the table. "What does a typical day look like for you? Depends on the season." "Right now, in September, I am mostly checking on the cattle, making sure they have good grazing and water, mending fences where needed. I have about 50 head right now, hoping to double that next year." He sat across from her with his own plate. "I also have some chickens for eggs, a vegetable garden that could use attention, and a milk cow named Bessie who has a temperamental streak." "I do not know much about ranching," Nora admitted, "but I am willing to learn. I will teach you whatever you want to know. But there is plenty to do around the house too if that suits you better. The garden, cooking, preserving food for winter. I have been doing it all myself, but I am not going to lie, I am better with cattle than I am with vegetables." They fell into an easy rhythm over the next few days. Lucas showed her around the property, introducing her to the animals and explaining how the ranch operated. Nora took over the kitchen and garden, finding satisfaction in the physical work and the visible results of her efforts. The chickens provided fresh eggs daily, and the garden still had tomatoes, squash, and beans ready for harvest. In the evenings, they sat together by the fireplace, talking about everything and nothing. Lucas told her about his childhood in Missouri, about losing his parents to illness before the war, about the things he had seen and done that still haunted him sometimes. Nora shared her own memories, the good ones from before everything fell apart, and slowly, carefully, she began to trust him. On the 5th day after her arrival, Nora woke feeling ill. Morning sickness had been mild so far, but today it hit her hard. She barely made it outside before losing what little she had in her stomach. When she straightened, wiping her mouth with a handkerchief, she found Lucas standing nearby with a cup of water and a concerned expression. "The baby?" he asked quietly. She nodded, taking the water gratefully. "It passes quickly usually. What can I do to help?" "There is not much anyone can do. It is just part of it." She sipped the water slowly. "I am sorry you have to see this, Nora." He waited until she looked at him. "You do not have to apologize for being pregnant or for the natural things that come with it. If you are sick, you are sick. If you need help, I want to help. That is what partners do." That afternoon, Lucas rode into town and returned with ginger root and peppermint tea, things the doctor had recommended for morning sickness. He brewed her tea without being asked and sat with her while she drank it, reading aloud from a book of poetry he had found somewhere. "You are a surprising man, Lucas Owens," Nora said when he finished a particularly moving piece. "How so?" "Cowboys are not supposed to read poetry." He laughed. "Who made that rule? I spent a lot of lonely nights on the range with nothing but books for company. A man can appreciate a good verse and still know how to rope a steer." "I suppose that is true." She set down her teacup and took a deep breath. "Lucas, I have been thinking. If your offer still stands, I would like to marry you." His whole face lit up. "You are sure? I do not want you to feel rushed, I am sure. You have been nothing but kind and patient with me. You have given me a safe place and asked for nothing in return. I want to be your wife, truly your wife, and I want this child to have your name." Lucas reached across the space between them and took her hand. "Then let's ride into town tomorrow and talk to the minister. We can be married by the end of the week if that suits you." "That suits me perfectly." They were married 3 days later in the small church in Holbrook, with the minister's wife and the general store owner as witnesses. Nora wore a simple blue dress that Lucas had insisted on buying for her, and he wore his best shirt and a string tie that made him look both handsome and slightly uncomfortable. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and told Lucas he could kiss his bride, he leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted to. She did not pull back. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, the kiss sweet and brief, a promise of patience and care. When they separated, his eyes were shining. "Hello, wife," he said softly. "Hello, husband." They celebrated with dinner at the hotel restaurant, a luxury Lucas insisted upon. Over roast beef and potatoes, they talked about practical matters, about combining their lives and planning for the future. But underneath, the practical talk was something else, a current of connection that had been building since the moment they met. When they returned to the ranch that evening, now truly their home together, Lucas carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests. "It is tradition," he said, setting her down gently in the main room. "And I am a traditional man in some ways. I am learning that." Nora looked around the familiar space, seeing it differently now that it was officially hers too. "Lucas, about sleeping arrangements, your room is still your room for as long as you want it," he said quickly. "Nothing has to change, but I want things to change." She met his eyes, trying to convey what she was feeling. I want to be your wife in truth. I want to share your bed and your life. I am just afraid that I might not be able to, that when the moment comes, I will freeze or panic because of what happened before. Lucas crossed to her and took both her hands in his. Then we go slow. We stop any time you need to stop. There is no rush, Nora. We have our whole lives ahead of us. That night, she went to his room instead of hers, and they lay together on top of the covers, fully dressed, just holding each other in the darkness. Lucas told her stories about the stars visible through the window, about constellations and legends, his voice a soothing rumble against her ear. She had never felt safer in her life. Over the following weeks, they grew closer in increments. A kiss goodnight became several kisses. Holding hands became comfortable embraces. Nora found that with Lucas, she did not feel the panic she had feared. His touch was always gentle, always welcomed, and he paid attention to her responses in a way that made her feel cherished rather than used. The first time they truly came together as husband and wife, it was a cool October evening with rain pattering on the roof. They had been sitting by the fire, and Lucas had been rubbing her feet, something that had become a nightly ritual as her pregnancy progressed. His hands had moved higher, to her calves, her knees, and she had pulled him up to kiss her properly. "Are you sure?" He had asked, his voice rough with desire but his eyes serious. "I am sure. I want this. I want you." He had carried her to bed and loved her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes, constantly checking that she was comfortable, that she was with him, that this was what she wanted. When it was over, she lay in his arms feeling whole for the first time since the assault, reclaiming something she thought had been stolen forever. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I know it is soon, but I do." "Not soon enough for me." He kissed her forehead. "I have loved you since your first letter, Nora. Every day since has just confirmed what I already knew." As autumn deepened into winter, they settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. Lucas taught Nora to ride, and she often accompanied him around the ranch, learning the work and offering help where she could. Her belly grew rounder, and Lucas treated her pregnancy with a reverence that sometimes made her laugh. "I am not made of glass," she protested one day when he tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of vegetables. "No, but you are carrying something precious, and I will not take chances." He took the basket from her despite her protests. "Humor me, wife. Let me take care of you." The neighboring ranchers and townspeople gradually accepted Nora as Lucas's wife, though she knew there was gossip about the quick marriage and her pregnant state. Lucas dealt with one man who made a crude comment by simply stating that anyone who spoke ill of his wife would not be welcome on his land or in his presence. Word spread quickly after that. There was one woman, though, who became a true friend. Sarah Montgomery ran the general store with her husband, and she had been one of the witnesses at their wedding. She appeared at the ranch one afternoon in November with a basket of baby clothes her own children had outgrown. "Thought you might be able to use these," Sarah said, her practical manner hiding a kind heart. "I know it can be expensive getting everything new." Nora invited her in for tea, and they spent the afternoon talking about pregnancy and babies and life in Arizona. Sarah did not pry into Nora's past or ask uncomfortable questions. She simply offered friendship and practical advice, which Nora gratefully accepted. "You got lucky with Lucas," Sarah said as she was leaving. "He is one of the good ones. My husband is friendly with him, says he is honest and hard-working, the kind of neighbor you want." "I know how lucky I am," Nora agreed, watching through the window as Lucas worked in the corral with a young horse. "Every single day, I know." Christmas came with unexpected snow, rare for Arizona but beautiful. Lucas surprised Nora with a rocking chair he had built in secret, working on it in the barn whenever she was occupied elsewhere. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with smooth rockers and a high back perfect for nursing a baby. "Lucas, it is beautiful," she breathed, running her hands over the polished wood. "When did you have time to make this?" "Made time." He looked pleased with her reaction. Every baby needs a rocking chair and every mother needs a comfortable place to sit. Wanted you to have something special. She kissed him soundly, no longer shy about showing affection. "Thank you. For this, for everything, for giving us a home. This is as much your home as mine now. More, maybe, because you make it feel like one instead of just a place to sleep." He knelt beside the chair where she had immediately sat to try it and placed his hand on her rounded belly. "How is our little one today?" "Active. I think he or she likes the rocking." She covered his hand with hers. "Lucas, have you thought about names?" They spent the evening discussing possibilities, discarding some and considering others. Lucas wanted to honor Nora's family despite how they had treated her, but she firmly refused to use any of their names. "They do not deserve that," she said. "This child will have your name and our love." That is more than enough. In the end, they decided to wait until the baby arrived to choose, wanting to see who they were welcoming before giving them a name. January brought cold winds and the realization that Nora's time was drawing near. The local midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Henderson, came out to the ranch to check on her and declared everything was progressing normally. "Should be any time now," Mrs. Henderson said. "Your husband knows to fetch me when your pains start." "He does," Nora confirmed, "though I think he is more nervous than I am. Most men are." The midwife smiled. "But he seems like the steady type. He will do fine." The pain started on a cold February morning, and Lucas nearly fell over himself in his rush to saddle a horse and ride for the midwife. Nora labored through the day with Sarah Montgomery keeping her company until Mrs. Henderson arrived and took over with brisk efficiency. Lucas paced outside the bedroom, forbidden from entering by the midwife who declared it no place for a man. But Nora could hear his footsteps and found comfort in knowing he was close. As evening fell, she finally heard the cry she had been waiting for, strong and healthy and indignant at being brought into the world. "You have a son," Mrs. Henderson announced, placing the cleaned and wrapped baby in Nora's arms. "Fine, healthy boy with a good set of lungs." Nora looked down at the tiny face and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. He had a dusting of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn the same gray-blue as Lucas's. She counted fingers and toes and marveled at the perfection of him. "Can my husband come in now?" she asked. Mrs. Henderson smiled. "I will get him." Lucas burst through the door moments later, his face anxious until he saw Nora sitting up in bed with the baby in her arms. Then his expression transformed into pure wonder. "Is he healthy? Are you all right?" he asked, approaching the bed slowly as if afraid he might disturb something sacred. "We are both fine. Come meet your son." Lucas sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby with awe written across his features. "He is so small. They tend to be at first." Nora smiled at his obvious nervousness. "Would you like to hold him? I might drop him." "You will not drop him. Here." She transferred the baby into Lucas's arms and watched as he instinctively cradled the infant against his chest. "Hello there, little man," Lucas said softly. "I am your pa. I have been waiting to meet you." He looked up at Nora with tears shining in his eyes. "He is perfect. Thank you for this gift." "We made him together," Nora said gently. "He is ours, just like you promised." They named him James after Lucas's father with the middle name Andrew. James Andrew Owens came into the world loved and wanted. And if anyone in town did the arithmetic and realized he arrived a bit early for a baby conceived in wedlock, They had the good sense not to mention it in Lucas's hearing. The first weeks with a newborn were exhausting but joyful. Lucas proved to be a devoted father, taking night feedings whenever possible so Nora could rest, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours just watching James sleep. He built a cradle that rocked gently and baby-proofed the house with a thoroughness that made Nora laugh. "He cannot even crawl yet," she pointed out when she found Lucas patting the corners of furniture. "He will be crawling before we know it. Better to be prepared." Lucas straightened and looked at the work he had done with satisfaction. "I want him safe, both of you safe and happy. That is all I have ever wanted." Spring arrived with wildflowers painting the desert in unexpected colors, and Nora carried James outside to see the transformation. At 3 months old, he was beginning to smile and coo, responding to Lucas's voice with excited arm flapping that delighted them both. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset with James drowsing in Lucas's arms, Nora reflected on the journey that had brought her here. A year ago, she had been desperate and alone, cast out by everyone who should have protected her. Now she had a husband who loved her, a son who depended on her, and a home that felt more real than anywhere she had ever lived. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "How much has changed? How grateful I am that you put that advertisement in the paper." "Best decision I ever made." He shifted James slightly and reached for her hand. "I meant what I said that first day, Nora. I felt like I had been waiting my whole life for you, still feel that way every morning when I wake up and you are there beside me." "I love you so much it frightens me sometimes," she admitted. "After everything that happened, I did not think I could feel this way about anyone." "You are the strongest person I know," Lucas said seriously. "What you survived would have broken most people, but you kept going. You got on that stage and traveled across the country to start over, even knowing you might be rejected. That takes courage most people do not have." "I did not feel very courageous. I felt terrified. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is doing what needs to be done despite the fear." He squeezed her hand. "You are raising our son to know what real strength looks like." As James grew, the ranch grew with him. Lucas expanded the herd and added more land, working from dawn until dusk to build something lasting for his family. Nora managed the household and helped where she could, teaching herself to keep accounts and manage supplies. They made a good team, each complementing the other's strengths. The town of Holbrook grew too, with new families arriving and businesses opening. Sarah Montgomery's general store expanded, and a proper schoolhouse was built. Nora made friends among the other ranch wives, women who respected her competence and appreciated her willingness to help when someone was sick or needed an extra pair of hands. When James was a year old, Nora discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear or shame, only joy as she told Lucas the news. "Another one." He swept her up and spun her around before remembering her condition and setting her down carefully. "Are you happy about it?" "Very happy." "Are you?" "Happiest man alive." He kissed her soundly. "James needs a brother or sister to keep him company." Their daughter arrived the following spring, a tiny thing with Nora's delicate features and a surprisingly loud cry. They named her Margaret Rose, and Lucas was completely besotted from the first moment he held her. "I have 2 children now," he said with wonder, sitting in the rocking chair he had made with Margaret in his arms and James leaning against his leg. 2 children and the most beautiful wife in Arizona. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Nora corrected, settling onto the arm of the chair and completing their family portrait. "We found each other when we needed it most." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered as Lucas's careful management and hard work paid off. They hired help during busy seasons, providing employment to cowboys passing through and young men from town looking for work. Nora ran the household with quiet efficiency, raised the children with patience and love, and still found time to maintain her garden and the chickens that provided eggs and the occasional Sunday dinner. James grew into a serious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning ranch work almost as soon as he could walk. Margaret was more spirited, with a laugh that rang across the yard and a stubborn streak that amused Lucas and exasperated Nora in equal measure. When James was 5 and Margaret 3, Nora approached Lucas with an idea that had been forming for some time. "I want to tell James the truth," she said one evening after the children were asleep. "About his birth father, about what happened to me. Not all the details, but enough that he understands you chose to be his father." Lucas was quiet for a moment, considering. "Why now?" "Because he is starting to ask questions about where babies come from, about whether he will look like you when he grows up. I do not want him to ever feel like we lied to him." She twisted her hands together nervously. "But I understand if you would rather wait or not tell him at all. No, you are right. He should know." Lucas pulled her close. "But we tell him together, and we make sure he understands that being a father is about more than blood. It is about showing up every day and choosing to love your children no matter what." They sat James down the next afternoon, choosing a time when Margaret was napping. He looked between them with his solemn gray eyes, sensing this was important. "Am I in trouble?" he asked worriedly. "Not at all, son." Lucas lifted him onto his lap. "Your ma and I want to talk to you about something important, something you are old enough to understand now." Together, they explained in simple terms that Nora had been hurt by a bad man before she came to Arizona, and that James had started growing in her belly because of that. They explained that Lucas had married Nora knowing about James and had chosen to be his father from the very beginning. James absorbed this information with the seriousness he brought to everything. "So, you are not my real pa." "I am absolutely your real pa," Lucas said firmly. "Being a pa is not about how a baby starts. It is about who loves you and takes care of you and teaches you and is there for you every single day. I have been your pa since before you were born, and I will be your pa until the day I die. And the bad man is not part of our family and never will be," Nora said gently. "He does not matter, James. You are ours and we are yours." James thought about this, his brow furrowed. "Thomas at school says his pa left and never came back. Does that mean his pa is not his real pa anymore?" "That is different," Lucas explained. "Thomas's pa made a choice to leave. The man who hurt your ma was never given a choice to be part of your life because your ma and I chose each other and chose you. You understand the difference?" "I think so." James leaned back against Lucas's chest. "I am glad you are my pa. You are the best pa anyone could have." Lucas's arms tightened around him. "And you are the best son. That is never going to change, no matter what." The conversation went better than Nora had hoped, and she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. No more secrets, no more fear that James would somehow find out and feel betrayed. He knew the truth now, and it did not change his world at all. As the years passed, the Owen family became a fixture in Holbrook. Lucas served on the town council and helped organize community events. Nora taught Sunday school and organized charity drives for families in need. James and Margaret grew like weeds, healthy and happy and secure in their parents' love. When James was 8, he asked Lucas if he could learn to rope properly. "Getting tired of the practice dummy?" Lucas asked with a smile. "I want to do real ranch work, like you." Lucas taught him patiently, the same way he did everything, never losing his temper when James missed or got tangled in his own rope. By the end of summer, James could rope a fence post 9 times out of 10, and his grin of accomplishment was worth all the hours of practice. Margaret, meanwhile, declared she was going to be a doctor when she grew up and spent hours bandaging her dolls and any family members who would sit still long enough. Nora encouraged her ambitions, even though she knew the path would not be easy for a woman. "The world is changing," she told Lucas. "Maybe by the time she is grown it will be different." "If anyone can do it, our Margaret can," Lucas agreed. "That girl is stubborn enough to move mountains." More children followed, 2 more sons and another daughter, until the Owen household was full of noise and laughter and the comfortable chaos of a large family. Lucas added rooms to the house, expanding it to accommodate their growing brood, and Nora managed them all with a patience she had not known she possessed. Through it all, her relationship with Lucas only deepened. They learned each other's rhythms and moods, communicated in glances across crowded rooms, and still made time to sit together in the evenings after the children were asleep, talking about their day and making plans for the future. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas took Nora into town for dinner at the hotel, leaving the children in Sarah Montgomery's capable care. Over the meal, he pulled out a small wrapped package. "What is this?" Nora asked, surprised. They did not usually exchange gifts beyond practical items. "Open it and see." Inside was a delicate silver locket on a chain. When she opened it, she found a tiny photograph of their whole family on one side and an engraving on the other that read, "My whole life I waited for you, Lucas." Tears filled her eyes. "It is beautiful. Had it made special. Wanted you to have something that shows how I feel." He came around the table to fasten it around her neck. 10 years ago, you stepped off that stage expecting rejection, and I knew the moment I saw you that my waiting was over. Best 10 years of my life, Nora. Here is to 50 more." "At least 50, she agreed, turning to kiss him. "I love you more now than I did that first day. That is the plan, is it not? Keep loving each other more as the years go by." He returned to his seat but kept hold of her hand across the table. "I was thinking about expanding the ranch again. Maybe buying that parcel of land to the north that just came available, but it would mean taking on more debt, working harder for a few years until it pays off." "Do it," Nora said without hesitation. "You have never made a bad decision when it comes to the ranch. If you think it is the right move, I trust you. We decide together now, remember, this affects the whole family. Then my decision is to trust your judgment and support whatever you choose." She smiled at him. "We are partners, Lucas, in everything." The expansion proved wise, as Lucas's instincts usually were. Within 3 years, they were running one of the most successful ranches in the area, employing several full-time hands and providing beef to markets across the territory. The work was hard, but the rewards were worth it. James grew into a capable young man who worked alongside his father with the easy competence of someone who had been raised to the life. At 16, he was already making his own decisions about the ranch and proving himself worthy of Lucas's trust. He never mentioned his biological father, having long since made peace with his origins and his identity as Lucas Owens' son in every way that mattered. Margaret, true to her childhood dreams, left for medical school back east at 18, one of only a handful of women accepted to the program. Nora worried about her being so far away, but Lucas reminded her that they had raised her to be strong and independent. "She is your daughter," he said when Nora fretted over Margaret's letters. "She inherited your courage and determination. She will be fine." The younger children followed their own paths as they grew. One son became a teacher, another took up carpentry, the youngest daughter married a shopkeeper in town. Each one carried with them the love and security they had known growing up in the Owen household. As Nora entered her 40s, she sometimes thought about the frightened girl who had arrived in Holbrook so many years ago. That girl had expected rejection and found acceptance instead. She had been prepared to be turned away and instead found a man who welcomed her like he had been waiting his whole life for her to arrive. And in many ways, he had been waiting for someone who understood loss and chose hope anyway. Waiting for a partner who would stand beside him through good times and hard times. Waiting for a woman who would fill his house with children and laughter and love. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, their positions reversed from those early days with Nora's head on Lucas's shoulder and his arm around her waist. He voiced the thought she had been thinking. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Coming all the way out here on faith, marrying a stranger, building this life? Not for one single moment." She turned to look at him, this man who had given her everything when she had nothing. "You saved me, Lucas. You and this ranch and our children. You gave me a reason to keep going when I thought I was all out of reasons. You saved yourself," he corrected gently. "You got on that stage. You survived what happened to you and kept moving forward. I just gave you a safe place to land. Then we saved each other." She kissed him softly. "My whole life, I was waiting for you too. I just did not know it until I saw you standing there in the street, looking at me like I was the answer to a question you had been asking forever. You were the answer. You still are." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky painted itself in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the house, their youngest daughter was practicing piano, the notes drifting through the open windows. The cattle lowed in the distance, settling for the night. The desert air cooled as the sun dropped below the horizon. It was an ordinary evening on an ordinary day, and it was perfect. Years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of ranch life. James took over more responsibilities as Lucas's joints started to protest the hard work of previous decades. Margaret returned home after completing her medical training and opened a practice in Holbrook, becoming the first female doctor in the territory and a source of immense pride for her parents. Grandchildren arrived, filling the house with new generations of noise and chaos. Lucas built a second rocking chair so he and Nora could sit together with babies in their laps, telling stories to the little ones just as they had to their own children. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled every corner of the expanded house, and the table Lucas had built so long ago groaned under the weight of food. As Nora looked around at the faces of the people they had created and raised and loved, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Lucas found her standing by the window, watching their oldest grandson chase chickens in the yard just as James had done at that age. "Happy anniversary, wife," he said, slipping his arms around her from behind. "Happy anniversary, husband." She leaned back against him. "Can you believe it has been 25 years? Some days it feels like yesterday. Some days it feels like you have always been here." He rested his chin on her shoulder. "Either way, I would not change a single moment, not even the hard times." They had weathered droughts and illness, lost cattle to harsh winters, and dealt with all the struggles that came with raising 5 children and running a ranch. Especially not the hard times. Those are what showed us what we are made of. He turned her in his arms so he could see her face. "We built something real here, Nora. Something that will last long after we are gone." She looked around at their family, at the house they had filled with love, at the land they had worked together to make prosperous. "We did we not?" That night, after everyone had left or been settled in various bedrooms and makeshift sleeping arrangements, Lucas and Nora retreated to their own room, the one they had shared for 25 years. The bed was the same one Lucas had built before their wedding, solid and sturdy, like the man himself. "I have something for you," Nora said, pulling a wrapped package from the wardrobe. Lucas opened it to find a hand-stitched quilt made from fabric scraps representing different moments in their life together. Pieces of the children's baby clothes, scraps from curtains Nora had sewn, patches from Lucas's work shirts, all arranged in a pattern that told their story. "Nora, this is incredible." He ran his hands over the careful stitching. "When did you have time to make this? I have been working on it for 2 years, a little bit at a time when you were not looking." She sat beside him on the bed. "I wanted to make something that captured our life together, all the moments big and small that made us who we are." Lucas pulled her close and kissed her with the passion of a much younger man. "I love you more today than I did yesterday, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise to you for the next 25 years and all the years after that." They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity. Two people who knew every inch of each other and still found joy in the discovery. Afterward, wrapped in the quilt Nora had made in each other's arms, they talked about the future. "James is ready to take over the ranch completely," Lucas said. "He has been ready for a while. Maybe it is time I step back and let him run things." "What would you do with yourself if you were not working the ranch every day?" Nora asked, amused. She could not imagine Lucas sitting idle. "There is plenty to do. Help Margaret with her clinic building. Spend time with the grandchildren. Take you on a trip somewhere. We have never left Arizona, you know. Might be nice to see something new together." "Where would we go?" "Anywhere you want. California to see the ocean. Back to Missouri to see what is left of my childhood home. Maybe even to Boston so you can show your family how well you have done without them." Nora shook her head firmly. "I have no interest in Boston or anyone there, but California sounds wonderful. I have always wanted to see the ocean." They made plans, dreaming in the darkness like they had when they were newly married. Only now they had a lifetime of shared memories to inform those dreams. Lucas did step back from the day-to-day ranch operations, turning control over to James, who proved more than capable of handling the responsibility. The trip to California was everything they hoped for. They stood on the beach holding hands, watching waves crash against the shore, and felt young again. They explored San Francisco, stayed in nice hotels, and spent 3 weeks simply enjoying each other's company without the demands of ranch life pulling them in different directions. "We should have done this years ago," Nora said as they watched the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. "We were busy building a life," Lucas replied. "But you are right. We should make a habit of this. Take a trip every year, just the two of us." They did establish that habit, alternating between adventures to new places and quiet retreats where they could simply be together. Their relationship, already strong, deepened even further as they entered their later years together. Lucas's hair turned fully gray, then white, and Nora's acquired silver streaks that she refused to hide. They wore their age proudly, badges of a life well lived and love well earned. When Lucas's knees finally gave him trouble, he used a cane without complaint and joked that it made him look distinguished. When Nora's eyes started to fail, Margaret fitted her with spectacles that allowed her to continue her reading and needlework. On their 40th anniversary, the family threw a massive celebration that seemed to include half the town of Holbrook. The ranch had become an institution, the Owen family name synonymous with honesty and hard work. James ran it with the same care Lucas had, and his own children were learning the trade just as he had. Margaret's medical practice thrived, and she had taken on a partner, a young doctor from back east who looked at her with the same devotion Lucas had always shown Nora. The other children had all established themselves successfully in their chosen fields. As Lucas stood to make a toast at the celebration, Nora watched him with eyes that still saw the young cowboy who had welcomed her so many years ago, overlaid now with the distinguished older man he had become. 40 years ago, Lucas began, his voice still strong despite his age. I put an advertisement in a Boston newspaper looking for a wife. I got 3 responses, but only one that mattered. Nora came all the way across the country to marry a stranger, and she brought with her more courage and strength and love than I had any right to expect. She has been my partner in everything, my best friend, the mother of my children, and the love of my life. If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing. Here is to 40 more years, my dear. I love you. The room erupted in applause and cheers, but Nora only had eyes for Lucas. She rose and crossed to him, kissing him soundly in front of God and everybody, uncaring of propriety or what anyone might think. 40 more years, she agreed. At minimum. They did not get 40 more years, but they got 20, and those were sweet. They watched grandchildren grow and have children of their own. They saw Holbrook transform from a rough frontier town into a proper city with electric lights and automobiles. The world changed around them, but their love remained constant. When Lucas finally began to fail in his late 80s, his heart growing weak and his body tired, Nora never left his side. Their children took turns sitting with them, but she was always there, holding his hand, reading to him, reminding him of all the wonderful years they had shared. No regrets. She asked one evening as the sun set over the ranch he had built. Not a single one, he replied, his voice thin but certain. You made my life worth living, Nora. From that first moment I saw you step off that stage, you were my whole world. And you were mine. You saved me, Lucas. In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, he corrected, just as he always had. That is what love is, I think. 2 people choosing to save each other over and over again. He died peacefully 3 days later with Nora holding his hand and their children surrounding his bed. His last words were, I love you, my Nora. My whole life I waited for you. Nora lived for 5 more years, cared for by Margaret and surrounded by family. She never remarried, never considered it. Lucas had been her husband, her partner, her great love, and there could never be anyone else. When her time came, she went peacefully in her sleep, and the family buried her beside Lucas on a hill overlooking the ranch. Their graves were marked with a simple stone that read, Lucas Owens, 1846, 1930 for Nora Fletcher Owens, 1859-1939 my whole life. I waited for you. The ranch continued through generations, each one honoring the legacy Lucas and Nora had built. James's children ran it, then his grandchildren, preserving not just the land but the values that had made it thrive. Hard work, honesty, and love. The story of how Lucas and Nora met became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. How she had arrived expecting rejection and found acceptance instead. How he had welcomed her like he had been waiting his whole life, because he had been. How they had built a life and a love that lasted decades and touched everyone around them. On the ranch, in a place of honor in the main house that had grown from Lucas's humble 2-room cabin, hung the quilt Nora had made for their 25th anniversary. Each square told a story, and together they wove the tale of 2 people who had found each other against all odds and created something beautiful. Visitors to the ranch often asked about the quilt and the couple who had started it all. The current generation of Owens would smile and tell the story, how their great-great-grandmother had come to Arizona Territory in 1879, pregnant and alone and expecting to be turned away. how their great-great-grandfather had seen past her circumstances to the woman beneath and had chosen love when it would have been easier to choose judgment. They saved each other, the story always ended. And in doing so, they built something that has lasted long after they were gone. Not just this ranch, but a legacy of love and acceptance, and the kind of courage it takes to welcome someone into your life completely, even when the world says you should not. The desert wind blew across the Arizona landscape, rustling through the grass and carrying the scent of sage and possibility. The ranch stood solid against the elements, just as Lucas had built it, just as he and Nora had maintained it, just as their descendants preserved it. And on a hill overlooking it all, two graves rested side by side, marking the final resting place of two people who had found each other when they needed it most and had built a love story for the ages. She had arrived expecting rejection. He had welcomed her like he had been waiting his whole life. And together, they had created something eternal,